Stand up. Go on if you're able. Stand up fast, the way you do when somebody knocks at the door. There. Did you feel it? The room leans a little. The light at the edges goes thin, like a lamp on a dimmer being turned low. Your hand finds the wall before you decided to reach for anything. And then, in a second, maybe two, the whole world clicks back into place, and you forget it ever happened. But something did happen. In that one gray second, something inside you went wrong. Seriously wrong. Then something else caught it and put it right, faster than you could finish a sentence. Nobody told you about any of it. You never felt the repair. I want to find out what broke, and I want to find out who fixed it. Let's be detectives about this. The first job of any detective is to write down what you actually know, not what you assume. So, what do we know for certain? You stood up. That's it. You didn't bleed. Nothing leaked out of you. You didn't stop breathing. Your heart never stopped. You have exactly as much blood standing up as you had lying down, not one drop missing. And yet, for a moment, the lights in your head went dim. That's a strange little fact when you sit with it. If nothing left, why did your brain behave as though it had suddenly run short of something? A factory that still has all its supplies sitting in the warehouse doesn't shut down the assembly line. So either something did go missing, in a way we haven't spotted yet, or the supplies went somewhere they had no business going. Keep that fork in the road in mind. It is our first real clue. Here is the thing we forget about blood, because we never once see it behaving like what it is. Blood is not some magical red spirit that floats wherever the body wills it. It is a liquid. It is mostly salty water, with an enormous crowd of tiny cells riding along in it, and like every liquid in the world, it has weight. It is pulled down. A jug of it would sit on your kitchen scale and read about the same as a jug of milk. And you are carrying around 5 quarts of the stuff, sloshing quietly through your pipes. That is heavy. That is a serious volume of liquid for gravity to get its hands on. While you were lying down, gravity could not make much mischief. Your heart and your head sat at the same height, side by side, like 2 coffee cups standing next to each other on a flat table. Pour liquid back and forth between them, and neither cup cares one way or the other. But the instant you stood up, you took that flat table, and you tipped it straight up on its end. Now your head is way up high, and your feet are way down low, and all that liquid, all those quarts of heavy salty water, feels the pull and wants to slide downhill. Let me show you how strong that pull really is, because here is the first thing that ought to surprise you. You already know how this works at the bottom of a swimming pool. Dive down to the deep end, and your ears begin to ache. Go deeper, and they ache harder. The water stacked above you is pressing down, and the deeper you go, the taller the stack, and the harder the squeeze. That squeeze is what we call pressure. And here is the strange part most people never stop to notice. The pressure down there depends only on how tall the column of water above you is. It does not care how wide the pool is. A skinny drinking straw of water and an entire ocean, if they are the same depth, press on the bottom with exactly the same pressure. Only the height counts. Hold on to that, because your body is about to become a column of liquid, and only the height is going to count. Standing up, you are a tall, warm, walking column of salty water. And that same rule that aches your ears in the deep end is running up and down the inside of you right now. Down at your feet there is a tall stack of blood pressing down, so the pressure there is high. Up at your brain there is hardly any stack above it at all, so the pressure there is low. The gap between the two, from your head down to your heart, is not some tiny thing you can wave away. When you rise to your feet, the pressure up where your thinking happens can fall by something like 1/3, purely from gravity, purely from the act of standing. 1/3 of it gone. That is, the tax gravity charges you for the privilege of lifting your brain up off the floor. And your brain, of every organ you own, is the fussiest customer in the building. It is a thin sliver of your total weight, and it demands a fat, greedy slice of your blood every single second, without one interruption. It keeps no pantry. It stores no fuel for a rainy day. It lives hand to mouth, heartbeat to heartbeat, on whatever fresh blood happens to arrive. Choke that supply for even a few seconds, and the brain starts shutting off the lights to save what little power it has left. And the very first lights it shuts off, oddly enough, are the ones running your eyes. That is the gray you saw. That thinning at the corners of your vision is your retina, the living screen at the back of your eye, browning out like a town at the far end of a power line when the voltage sags low. The eyes go dark first, because they sit up highest and they burn fuel fastest. Fighter pilots know this feeling in their bones. Throw an airplane into a hard, tight turn, and the machine flings the blood down and out of the pilot's skull, and his world grays, then narrows to a tunnel, then drops to black, in that exact order, the top of the body always starving first. Same physics, same gray. You simply ran a gentle little version of it, standing up out of your chair. So there it is. We've got our culprit. Gravity. Case closed. Everyone go home. Blood is heavy. You stood up. It sank. Your brain went hungry. The end. Except that is not the whole story, and a good detective gets most suspicious exactly when the answer arrives too neatly. Because here is the question that wrecks the tidy version. If gravity is simply dragging your blood down toward your feet, why on earth doesn't it stay down there? Why don't you black out and crumple to the floor every single time you stand, like a glass of water tipped over and never set upright again? You don't. You stand up dozens of times a day, and the gray, when it bothers to come at all, lasts a second and then quits. Something undid the damage. Gravity didn't get tired and wander off. Gravity never quits, never sleeps, never takes a holiday. So somebody, something, overruled it. Let me sweep aside one tempting wrong answer first, because I nearly fell for it myself. You might guess that the heart simply has to pump harder to shove the blood uphill to the brain. The brave little heart straining against gravity, heaving blood up the slope. It is a lovely, heroic picture, and it is mostly beside the point. The real trouble when you stand is not that the heart must push uphill. The trouble is sneakier than that, and it happens behind the heart, not in front of it. Watch where the blood actually goes when it sinks. It does not settle evenly all over. It pools, and it pools in one particular place, in the big soft veins down in your legs and your belly. Now your arteries, the muscular pipes that carry blood away from the heart, those are tough and springy, like a thick garden hose. But your veins, the pipes that bring the blood back home to the heart, the veins are floppy. They are thin and slack and stretchy, far more like a wet paper bag than a hose. And when you stand, gravity fills those floppy leg veins the way water fills a balloon, and they bulge, and they hold. A good cupful, 2 cupfuls, more, that a heartbeat ago was up in the running, gets trapped, loitering down in your legs. Here is why that is the true disaster. Your heart can only ever pump out what first comes back into it. It is not a magic spring conjuring blood from thin air. It is a pump, and a pump that nothing flows into has nothing to push out. So when all that blood gets stuck dawdling in your legs and fails to come home, the heart's filling chambers arrive half empty. Half-empty chambers give a small squeeze. A small squeeze sends out a small spurt into the body. And a small spurt, piled on top of that gravity tax we already counted, means the pressure feeding your brain falls right off a cliff. So that is the crime. Finally laid out plain. You stood up. Gravity yanked a couple of cups of blood down into the slack veins of your legs. The heart, starved of its return, pumped weak and thin. And the pressure at your hungry, fussy, irreplaceable brain dropped hard and fast. Your retinas dimmed and your hands shot out for the wall. Now I am going to show you something that genuinely surprised me, because it turns one of our assumptions completely upside down. You would think that the most dangerous thing you could do, in the middle of all this, is move around. Thrash about. Surely stillness is safer. Well, it is exactly the other way around. The single most dangerous thing you can do is stand up and then hold perfectly, rigidly still. Ask any soldier who has stood at attention on a hot parade ground. Every so often one of them keels straight over in a dead faint, stiff as a board, while the ones shifting and fidgeting beside him stay upright and fine. Why? Because your leg muscles are part of this machine. Every time you tense your calf, every time you take a step or rock on your feet, those muscles clamp around the floppy leg veins and squeeze them like a fist around a tube of toothpaste, driving the trapped blood back up toward the heart. The veins even have little one-way doors inside them, so the squeezed blood can only travel one direction, up, toward home. Your legs are a second pump, a pump you drive by moving. Stand stone still and you switch that pump off, and the blood just sits and pools, and down you go. The fidgeting soldier is unconsciously pumping himself conscious. So that is our second clue, and it is a good one. The fix involves muscle. The fix involves squeezing. But muscle squeezing your legs is something you would have to choose to do. And you didn't choose anything when you stood up just now. The rescue happened all on its own, beneath your notice, before you could form a single thought. And that, the automatic part, is the real mystery, the one that's been nagging at me from the very start. Forget gravity. Gravity is just the dumb bully of this story, always shoving, never once thinking. The fascinating character is whoever noticed the shove and shoved straight back. Because to correct a problem this fast, something inside you first had to measure it. It had to know, inside a single heartbeat, that the pressure had just collapsed. You cannot fix a thing you cannot sense. So somewhere inside you there has to be a gauge, a pressure gauge, and not some slow, lazy dial you stroll over and read at your leisure, but a fast, twitchy, never-blinking gauge wired straight into the controls. Where is it? What is it? Find that gauge, and we have found our hero. And there is a gauge. Two of them, as it turns out, and they are placed with what I can only call genius. One sits in the great curved pipe rising straight up out of the top of the heart, the aorta, right at the spot where the blood begins its whole journey. The other sits higher still, in the side wall of your neck, inside the artery that climbs up toward the brain. Stop and think about where that second one is posted. It sits at the toll booth on the one and only road leading up to headquarters. If you wanted the earliest possible warning that the brain was about to lose its supply, that is precisely where you would station your sentry, right at the foot of the hill the blood has to climb. Now here comes the clever cheat, and I love this one, because nature stumbled onto a lazy, brilliant shortcut. These gauges do not measure pressure the way you would expect a proper gauge to. They have no little needle reading off pounds for you. They measure something far easier to feel. They measure stretch. The wall of the artery is springy, like the rubber of a balloon. When the pressure inside runs high, the wall is hauled tight and stretched taut. When the pressure falls, the wall sags and goes slack. And woven into that artery wall are nerve endings that simply hate being stretched and complain about it without pause. When the wall is pulled tight, they fire off a fast, busy chatter of signals, rat-a-tat-tat, racing up the nerve to the brain. When the wall goes slack, they fall quiet. So the brain never actually receives a number. It receives a feeling. A storm of chatter means everything is tight and full and well. A sudden hush means the pressure just dropped. The silence itself is the alarm. And when you stood up and the pressure crashed, the nerves up in your neck went abruptly, frighteningly quiet. And that quiet was a scream. The scream races down to a small, dense knot of nerve cells in the lowest, oldest part of your brain, the part perched right on top of the spinal cord, the part that quietly runs all the machinery you never have to think about. This is not the thinking brain. This is the engine room. And the engine room hears the silence arriving from the neck and acts on the instant, with no debate, no committee, no waiting around for you to notice anything is wrong. It does three things at once, all inside the same heartbeat. It tells the heart, faster, beat faster now. You can sometimes catch this one yourself if you pay close attention, a quick little flurry of extra beats right after you rise. Second, it tells the heart, squeeze harder, wring out every last drop you are holding. And third, the cleverest move of all, it reaches out to all those floppy slack pipes, especially the ones down in the legs and the gut, and it orders them, tighten up, clamp down. The muscle wrapped around those vessels obeys and squeezes, and the slack pipes go stiff and narrow, and the blood that was pooling and dawdling gets shoved back up into the game, back toward a heart that suddenly has something to pump again. The pressure climbs. The chatter from the neck picks back up. The alarm shuts off. The entire emergency, beginning to end, is finished before you have even finished thinking the word woe. You have met this kind of machine before, even if nobody told you its name. Back in the great age of steam, the engineers had a maddening problem. An engine left to run free would speed up, and the faster it ran, the more it ran away with itself, until it shook itself to pieces. So some clever soul hung 2 heavy iron balls on hinged arms off the spinning shaft. When the engine ran too fast, the balls flew outward, and as they swung out, they pulled a linkage that pinched the steam valve closed, which slowed the engine down, which let the balls droop back inward, which cracked the valve open again. Round and round it went, the machine watching itself, correcting itself, holding itself steady with not one human hand on it. A governor, they called it. The machine had become its own operator. That is exactly, precisely what is going on inside you every single time you stand. The stretch in your artery wall is the pair of flying iron balls. The quieting nerve is the linkage. The engine room down in your brainstem is the valve. And the whole loop, sense the pressure, send the signal, make the correction, then sense again, runs around and around several times every second, holding the supply to your brain steady against a gravity that pulls and never once lets up. You are a governed machine. You carry a flyball governor built out of meat and nerve, and it has been turning without a single moment's rest since before the day you were born. So let's walk back to the question we started with. What is the first thing your heart notices when you stand up too fast? And now, at last, we can give the honest and rather surprising answer. The first thing is not a pain. It is not a strain. It is not some gallant effort to heave blood up the hill. The first thing the heart notices is emptiness, a sudden, eerie lightness. The chambers that ought to arrive brimming full of blood instead arrive slack and half-filled, because the blood meant to fill them is trapped down, loitering in your legs. The heart's very first news of the entire event is simply that less is coming home. The walls of the heart and its great vessels feel that emptiness, that loss of stretch, and it is exactly that feeling of emptiness, that slackening, that trips the first alarm and calls down to the engine room and sets the whole rescue running. Sit with how strange and how beautiful that is. The signal that saves your life is not a signal of effort or strain. It is a signal of absence. Your body catches the danger by noticing that something it was expecting simply isn't there. The hush of the nerves, the slack in the wall, the lightness in the heart. Your survival in that gray second hangs entirely on a system whose whole genius is to be exquisitely, instantly alarmed by nothing, by less, by missing. Once you can see this machine clearly, you start to notice what happens when nature pushes the design to its limits, and that is where the real fun begins. Picture the tallest fellow in the whole animal kingdom, the giraffe. His brain is not perched a hand's width above his heart, the way yours is. It rides way up at the top of that absurd, magnificent neck, an enormous climb for the blood to make. To force blood all that way up, the giraffe runs a blood pressure that would drop you stone dead where you stand. Something close to twice the pressure inside your own arteries, maybe more. But now picture what happens when that giraffe bends his head all the way down to drink at a watering hole. Suddenly his brain swings down below his heart, and all that ferocious high pressure ought to slam into his skull like an open fire hose and burst it apart. It doesn't. The giraffe carries valves in the veins of his neck, and spongy nets of fine vessels, and a whole clever rigging of plumbing built precisely to catch and tame that surge, so he can fling his great head up from the water and down to it all day long, and never faint and never burst. He owns the very same governor you do. His is just built for a far wilder ride, and it runs the other direction too. Take a man and lay him in a bed and forbid him to stand for weeks on end. Or send him up where there is no gravity at all, floating free, where there is no down for the blood to pool toward, and the governor finds itself with nothing left to fight. And that governor, like any muscle handed no work to do, goes soft and lazy and forgets its trade. Bring that man back down to his own 2 feet, back into the steady pull of gravity, and the very first time he stands, the alarm howls and nobody answers it, and the gray floods in and does not lift, and down he crumples. Not because a single thing is broken inside him, but because a skill that goes unused gets quietly forgotten, even a skill as ancient and as deep as standing upright without fainting. So here is where all this detective work has left me, and I will admit it has changed the way I feel about the simple act of getting up out of a chair. You are a tall column of heavy liquid, and you have your single most precious, most fragile, most ravenously demanding organ perched right at the very tip-top of that column, the worst conceivable place to put it, the hardest possible place to keep supplied. And gravity knows it. Gravity pulls without rest, every second of your life, forever trying to drain the blood down out of your head and pool it in your feet, forever trying to switch off your mind and lay you flat on the ground. By every rule of plain, dumb physics, you should not be able to stand up and think a clear thought at the very same time. The plumbing is against it. The arithmetic is against it. And yet here you are, upright, reading, thinking, because riding silently beneath everything you are aware of, there sits an ancient, tireless, frankly brilliant little machine that has caught gravity red-handed every single time it tried. Every time you have ever stood up. As a small child bouncing up out of bed. As a tired grown adult heaving up out of a chair. Thousands upon thousands of silent rescues, one after another, and it has never once asked you for so much as a thank you, never once let you feel the danger it was steering you safely past. That gray flicker you sometimes catch when you rise too fast is not a malfunction. It is the one rare moment the rescue happens to run a half-second behind, and you get to glimpse, just for an instant, the sheer size of the thing your body has been quietly handling on your behalf your whole life long. The next time the room goes thin at the edges as you stand, I hope you won't just grab the wall and forget it the way you always have. I hope you'll stand there 1 extra second and feel the governor catch you. Feel the pressure come climbing back. Feel the lights rise. And think to yourself, there it is. That is the machine. That is the thing that has been holding my head up against the entire weight of the world. So let me leave you with this one to turn over. If your body can sense a danger this precisely, and fix it this completely, and do it all this fast, without you, beneath your notice, without ever once asking your permission, then how much of what you call you is really doing the deciding, and how much is being quietly, ceaselessly handled by machinery you will never meet? Tell me where you think the line falls between the part of you that thinks and the part of you that simply, faithfully keeps you alive.